Welcome back to Basic How To. Today we are going to be discussing mixing gas. So you probably already know that some motors require mixing oil with gas for the lubrication. That's going to be two-stroke motors. Two strokes will receive their lubrication by gas having oil mixed into it. And as that goes through the engine, it will provide the lubrication for moving parts. Four-stroke engines, like you have in your car, or this snowblower right here, receives the lubrication by oil being dumped into a pan underneath the engine. And that oil is either going to be splashed about from the bottom of your connecting rod, or in a car, oil pump is going to pump it through passages and lubricate your engine. So for the sake of conversation today, we're discussing two strokes. We're going to touch on how to tell the difference, how to know if you need to mix fuel or put oil in. We're going to discuss premix versus mixing your own, pros and cons, bring up a point where you might still want to have premix on hand. I personally like having it. And we're also going to touch on how to tell if your gas is bad, if it's still fresh, and ethanol contamination. So let's get into it. First off, how do we know if our motor needs oil? The manufacturer will recommend it, usually in the manual. That's one source. Another way of thinking is usually small handheld equipment will require mixed fuel, but that isn't always the case. So we have two pieces of handheld equipment. An old Premix 3200 chainsaw. This is probably 20 years old now. And we have a Ryobi split shaft trimmer. This is 5 years old. So this requires a 40-to-1 ratio. We look at the cap, the gas cap, and it says 40-to-1. We look at this weed whacker, and okay, the cap doesn't say, it says gasoline only. Okay, gasoline only. 4-cycle. So this is actually a 4-cycle weed whacker. You're beginning to see that more on the market. So first off, it says 4-cycle. Nextly, if we examine a little bit more, we see a little oil plug back here. And it says something 50 rate. Can't see exactly what it is. I don't remember. But it does have an oil symbol, and it's calling for motor oil. Little fill plug and dipstick. So you'll want to look over your engine. You'll want to maybe look at the manual. Usually small engines that require oil will say so on the cap. A lot of snowblowers are usually 4-stroke, but that isn't always the case. There's a couple single stage snowblowers behind me. 2 of them requires mixed gas, 50-to-1 ratio. The other one is a 4-cycle. It has an oil plug on the back. It says 4-cycle on the front. And I do believe the gas cap says gas only, or it's just a normal cap. So that's going to be how you figure out, do I need oil or not? If you can't find your owner's manual, simple Google search for your piece of machinery, and maybe even just type in oil ratio. It's a lot of good information on the internet. Look through a couple different blogs, message boards, and make sure people are consistently saying the same thing. So now that we discussed do we need oil or not, let's talk a little bit about premix or mixing your own. We have a 40-to-1 and 50-to-1 ratio here. This is Premix. The benefits of this is it's shelf stable, it's convenient, and it's ethanol free. Those are 3 great points. There's one killer in my book for it. $4 to $6 a quart, over $20 a gallon. This might not be a good option if you're cutting your firewood for the year. It's not a good option for a 2-stroke snowblower where you're going to be going through half a gallon a gallon a storm. Then you might want to consider mixing your own. I personally like having both on hand. So there's a couple things I love about this. So especially this time of the year in Maine, it's not uncommon to have a tree come down across the driveway. Having this in my saw all winter is great. I can grab one of my saws, it's ready to go with gas, fire it up and go. I wouldn't necessarily want to be leaving gas I mixed myself in the saw. Either you're going to have ethanol contamination from gas from a gas station, or I have heard that this are more prone to separation than your premixes. So the convenience factor of grab it, it's ready to go is great. Now, that's one area I use it. If I'm doing a lot of cutting, I'm mixing my own. The other consideration I might have is after I'm done cutting all day, doing yard cleanup with blowers, power brums, equipment of that nature, will be run the mix I made myself, and then at the end of the day for the last half hour, run premix through it. Just a half cup, quarter cup, doesn't need to be much. If you're not going to be running that equipment for 6 months to a year, it might not be a bad idea to run it completely dry. But that can be a great way to store your equipment. So I think this is great to have on hand. If you don't use much gas at all, maybe it's all you need. If you're doing more, you're probably going to want to mix. So when we get into mixing, we're going to want to make sure we're mixing with fresh gas. Right here we have some pretty fresh gas. It's almost clear. It's almost clear enough I want to drink it. So this is fresh. It looks great. Right over here we have some gas that is probably a year or two old. I had it sitting in the bottom of a gas tank, just in the corner of it. And you can see it's cloudy, it's yellow, it has an orange hue to it. And on the very bottom, just the very bottom, it's a little line, and you can see a separation, and that is water. So water is not good for motors. That gas is not going to have a motor ever running great on it. It's going to be sputtering, stalling out. You're going to be leaving varnish deposits on your motor. So it's best to not be using that, period. If you have that, you have a couple options to get rid of it. If you have an older vehicle, vehicles can take old gas better than small equipment. So if it doesn't seem that bad, pull off the gas. Try to not get any of the separated water into this mix you're pouring off. Add it to your car. If you're not comfortable with that, most towns and municipalities will do a waste disposal. EPA will have some sort of disposal, so that's a way to look into it. So now we have fresh gas. The other thing to consider with the gas we're purchasing is ethanol. The premix are going to be ethanol free. Most gas stations will have up to 10% ethanol, and that isn't the best for small engines. Cars has came a long way. They handle it exceedingly well. But on small engines, I have seen a lot of carbs clogged up, damaged from ethanol, and that can happen in a period as short as 2 to 5 years. That little Ryobi that I showed you a minute ago, that was on Marketplace. I picked it up free for the taking side of the road. It took 20 minutes to clean up the carb and throw another diaphragm in that I had. That chainsaw was one of my father's. It's been sitting in a basement for a while with gas. That needed a good cleaning. But it doesn't take long for ethanol to either gel up and clog passages in your carburetor. Usually the engine would be fine. Or with small handheld equipment, other than bowls in your carburetor, you have diaphragms. And this is a rubbery material, and it can pill all up on the side, dry. It would become brittle and crack easily, and it just doesn't pump the gas well. You'll usually notice that more when the weather's cold, under 50 degrees. So that's something to consider. It does happen quick. To get ethanol-free gas, I know in my area there's 3 places that I know to buy it. There's a small convenience store down the road. This is the only time I've ever seen that at a gas station, so that's kind of surprising. The places that you might want to look is, I know for myself, there's an oil company that delivers my oil, and they actually have a ethanol-free pump at the main office. And where I've been buying my gas for years now for home use and walk use is airport. So it's a small airport. It's not like the large airport you go to when you're going to Disney or something, but just take a look around online, give a call to a local small airport and ask if they sell ethanol-free aviation or automotive. Usually you can still run aviation. It's going to be a higher octane ratio with that, like 100% octane. It might take a little bit more to get your engine started with that, but it will run through it fine. You might need to adjust your carb a little bit. Best would be normal octane, but ethanol free. Just something to consider. You usually on small equipment will not need to go with a higher octane ratio. Regular gas will be all you need. The octane will delay the ignition in that's not really right. So sports cars, high compression vehicles with a high compression ratio can pre-ignite, if I understand correctly, the gas, standard regular gas, before the spark, before it's ready to go off. And that's the benefit of going a higher octane. It delays that. The compression you have in small engines is not going to be enough to have it go to have the gas going off early. So that's pretty much your considerations. Now for mixing in the ratio, if we're doing a gallon and we're doing a 50-to-1 ratio, that's going to be 2.6 ounces of oil. Let's go with a oil that is designed for use in a 2-stroke engine, synthetic or standard. I prefer synthetic myself. For a 40-to-1 ratio, it's going to be 3.2 ounces. So that's marked on the label. 2.6 would be for 1 gallon of 50-to-1. 3.2 ounces of oil will be for a 40-to-1 ratio. There's some charts online. I can include a link in the video description. So most of these bottles are pretty straightforward. We squeeze, fill up. We're going to do a 50-to-1, so 2.6 ounces. I like dumping the oil in first myself. Then the gas mixes it about, and we dump in the gas. You can mix smaller ratios. You can do a quart at a time. It can become more difficult to get the ratio correct. I believe when you downscale the 2.6 ounces divided by 4, because it's 4 quarts in a gallon. I ended up switching it to milliliters and figuring it out into teaspoons. It works out to 3 3/4 teaspoons of oil to a gallon to a quart of gas for a 50-to-1 ratio. As you can imagine, it's a little bit harder to get the ratio accurate when you're dealing with such small amounts. But it definitely can be doable if you take your time. And it is a benefit to only mixing a quart if you need a small batch. You can always mix a gallon, and you're not going to hurt your car in the least if at the end of the day, end of the week, after you use what you need, you dump the excess into a car. It's going to be so diluted, you're never going to notice any difference. Once you mix this, it is usually recommended that you use it within a week, that you don't mix this for the whole summer and leave it sitting around. So that's something to consider. Give it a good shake and fill your equipment. Thanks for joining today. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you all again. Have a good day. Thanks.